Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's session. This is what can help prevent cancer. We will be talking for the next hour, so I appreciate you joining us tonight. My name is Maria Cecilia Mosquera. I am a physician. I am both a pediatrician and a public health preventive medicine physician. I'm certified in obesity medicine as well as lifestyle medicine. And I'm coming to you today from the University of Nicosia Medical School, where I work as the clinical assistant professor in the Department of Primary Care and Population Health. I am speaking to you today on behalf of the University of Nicosia's Medical Center. So today we will be talking about nourishing and caring for yourself to prevent cancer. And the point of today's talk is to talk a little bit about what could reduce your risk of getting cancer. So the aims are to provide adults with knowledge and tools that can help reduce the risk of getting cancer, with learning objectives first, to explain the 10 recommendations for cancer prevention. Second, to demonstrate easy ways to incorporate nourishing foods into your daily life. Third, to discuss the importance of lifestyle for cancer prevention. And fourth, to demonstrate how to create SMART goals. Now, we are doing this session through YouTube Live, so the chat box is open via YouTube at any time during this session. Please post any questions or comments you have. We will be talking for 1 hour, and make sure that you stand and stretch as you need. I'll be sitting for this presentation, but as we are talking about lifestyle, I encourage you to stand while you're listening, move, stretch, whatever you need to do. Why are we talking today about what can prevent cancer? So there are many things to worry about in today's world with the COVID pandemic and everything that comes with it. But many of us are still thinking about what concerns we have about our lifestyle, our current health, and our future health. And cancer may be one of those concerns or worries. So there are general cancer prevention recommendations, and that's what we will be discussing today. So these are recommendations based on evidence and research. And the reason I'm talking with you today is I want to make sure that you have access to these recommendations and you know what they are. So these recommendations come from the World Cancer Research Fund and the American Institute of Cancer Research have published documents, the most recent one of which lists these 10 recommendations here. So you can access this information. It will be from their website if you look up World Cancer Research Fund, but we're going to be going through each one of these steps today. So the 10 recommendations together represent a package of healthy lifestyle choices. And together, these can make an enormous impact on our likelihood of developing cancer, as well as other non-communicable diseases or chronic diseases over our lifetimes. This is why I want to share them with you, because you should know about them. So the first one we'll be discussing is about weight. The next set will be about diet and nutrition. The third set will be a combination of things, including supplements, what to do about supplements, breastfeeding, and physical activity. The 10th recommendation is the fact that these cancer prevention recommendations are not only for people who have never had cancer, but also for people who have had cancer and can follow these recommendations after their cancer diagnosis. So today we're going to be talking about being a healthy weight, eating whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and beans, limiting fast foods, limiting red and processed meat, limiting sugar-sweetened drinks, limiting alcohol consumption. We're going to talk about not using supplements for cancer prevention, about breastfeeding your baby if you can, and about being physically active. So let's start with the first one, being a healthy weight. So this is a time where if you look at the screen right now, you'll see a little red dialog box on the right-hand side. And that means that this is your opportunity that I would welcome you to put any thoughts or feelings about your own weight now, what you know about it, in the chat box here. Maybe you have concerns, maybe you don't know how much you weigh, maybe you don't know if your weight is healthy. So whenever in my presentation you see a little red dialog box, that means I'm going to be looking through the chat box to see if any of you have any comments or any thoughts. So what about your weight? Why do we want to be a healthy weight? So being overweight or obese increases our risk of type 2 diabetes, coronary heart disease, and stroke, among other things, but also can lead to 12 different types of cancer, including pancreatic, liver, and some kinds of breast cancer. So being a healthy weight is not just about cancer, it's obviously about everything else. But today we're talking about cancer and what are the things we can do to prevent it. So being a healthy weight is one of them. And what are the goals for being a healthy weight? They are that you should keep your weight as low as you can within the healthy range for adults throughout your life. And you should avoid weight gain throughout adulthood. So how do you know if you have a healthy weight? So there is a scale on the screen because you have to weigh yourself first. That's one of the first steps. But second is we also need to know how tall you are, because it's not only about your weight, but your weight for your height. And we calculate something called body mass index. The formula is on the screen, but you don't need to memorize it, and I'll tell you why in a second. But just so that you know, a normal body mass index, or BMI, is between 18.5 and 24.9. 25 and above would be overweight or obese, and less than 18.5 would be underweight. So I mentioned before that you don't have to know how to do this calculation, because there are many, many websites and apps that will do this calculation for you. So if you weigh yourself and measure your height, you'll be able to calculate your BMI and understand whether the weight that you in height for your height that you have is healthy for you. And how can you maintain a healthy weight? So this is all about energy balance. First, you want to be physically active, and you want to eat a diet rich in whole grains, non-starchy vegetables, fruits, legumes, or pulses like beans. And you also want to limit fast foods and other processed foods high in fat, starches, or sugars, and sugar-sweetened beverages. Now, is this easy? This is another opportunity for you all to put us a comment in the chat box. So if this were easy, we would all be perfectly healthy and be eating the best diets, and there would be no chronic diseases in the world, right? So there are easy ways to do this, which is why we're going to be talking about this. That's the point of today's talk, is to tell you that there are some easy things you can do to do this. The first is eat whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and beans. So why do we want to do this? Because eating these can protect against certain cancers, as well as against weight gain, overweight, and obesity. So what should we be eating? So non-starchy fruits and vegetables, like the greens that are on this page, as well as fruits and vegetables listed here. Non-starchy roots and tubers like carrots, artichokes, turnips, whole grains. You see a picture on the screen of brown rice, of quinoa, which is a seed, of whole oats, and as well as pulses or legumes, which are beans, lentils of any kind. And right now I'm talking to you from Cyprus. So we happen to be lucky in Cyprus that you can find quite a variety of vegetables. Some of them are listed here, fresh in their form or prepared. And also we have fruits accessible to us everywhere. So if you live in Cyprus, it's pretty easy to access and find fruits and vegetables throughout the year. So Cyprus tends to use different foods during their different seasons. Maybe it's the same in whatever part of the world you're watching this from. So when we have access to fruits and vegetables, you want to make sure that you choose those whole fruits and vegetables, and choose them rather than their products like juice. Whole fruit has more fiber, and you will eat it slower. So you want to try things like seeds and nuts, as well as pulses and legumes, all the things that come from nature. These are all great sources of fiber. So remember to choose whole foods. Also choose whole grains. We talked about that a little bit before. So whole grain breads, whole grain cereals. The reason is that the carbohydrates that have fiber, and like whole grains, like brown rice or oats, take longer for your body to digest, and for one, they'll make your blood glucose level go up less. So here is a picture of what your day might look like if you have a breakfast that's full of fruits, vegetables, whole grains. So for breakfast, you might have some whole grain pancakes maybe made with some flaxseed, or for lunch, you might have some beans with some whole grain tortillas and some tomatoes and peppers. For dinner, you might have a fruit salad and as well as a green salad, and some beans or legumes with some whole grain pita bread. And for snacks, you could have some veggies, or you could have some dried chickpeas, or some, let's say, bread with hummus. So there are ways that you can fill your day with pulses or legumes. In fact, I've heard people mention that the idea would be to have as much of these as you can, but for example, 3 or more times a week. So this is a time when I would love to see your point of view on how you add fruits, veggies, whole grains, and pulses into your day. And if I see questions in the chat box, I may defer some of them towards the end, but I'll try to answer the ones that are about the topics I see now. So thank you if you're writing in the chat box. So how do you add fruits, veggies, whole grains, and pulses into your day? And while you do that, while you give me some answers, I'm going to show you one way that you can do it. So think about what your plate looks like when you sit at dinner, at lunch, at breakfast. So about half of your plate should be fruits and vegetables. So salad, etc. 1/4 protein. So those are things like legumes, beans, lean proteins like lean chicken. And 1/4 of your plate should be whole grains like the oats or the rice that we talked about before. So this is an example from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine that gives an example of what a plant-based diet would look like, because right now in this particular point of the recommendations, we're talking about increasing legumes, whole grains, vegetables, and fruits. So this is why I'm showing this one right here. Half fruits and vegetables, 1/4 plant proteins, and 1/4 whole grains. So these are pictures of meals in Cyprus. The left-hand side, you might go to a restaurant, they give you a plate that looks more like a platter that could serve a whole family. And it has meat, and it has something called burguri and French fries. And maybe a little bit of lettuce and tomatoes. You might have eaten a salad before, but the whole plate, when you serve it to yourself without the salad that you've eaten before, is not quite looking like the healthy plate we looked at, as opposed to the one on the right-hand side where you can see how it's half fruits and vegetables, 1/4 lean proteins, and 1/4 breads. So it's not just about how you design your plate, but obviously it's also about how much you eat. So if you eat that whole platter of food that they serve that could feed a couple of people, that's too many portions for yourself. As well as if you choose the large bag of fries, or chips or crisps, the large juice, or if you order or go out to eat at a restaurant and you eat everything that you ordered because your eyes were hungrier than your stomach actually is. So portion sizes are important. And I see that somebody is giving a thought about eating at least a fruit halfway through the morning and sometimes in the afternoon as a snack. But in the afternoon, it might be tough to have one fruit. So yes, we'll talk a little bit about snacking later on. So thank you to those of you that are writing in the chat box. So I'm just going to give an example of those of you that might be in Cyprus of what a meal might look like. So this might be when you go out on the weekend, and we're going to talk about it because maybe they serve a salad first. You might have some type of appetizer, maybe it's some bread and tahini, maybe some olives. And then when your meal comes, it might look like the picture in the middle where it's chicken, burguri, potatoes, and maybe you're drinking a beer, maybe you're drinking some wine. And by the end of the meal, they might serve you some sweets and you might have a coffee. So if you look at everything put together on this screen, it's quite a bit of food. So it gives a point about how portions would be important and how the balance of your plate would be important. Because if you eat your salad first and then eat the appetizers and then eat the whole meal, that's quite a bit of food, and it's not focused mostly on what we were talking about before, which is whole grains, plants, so fruits and vegetables, and legumes. So there's nothing wrong with eating the foods that are on here. We just have to think about what might be important is the balance. And for example, you don't want to be having a meal this big 7 days a week, So think about the balance with the types of foods you're eating, how much you're eating, and how often. So let's talk about fast foods. The recommendations are to limit fast foods, and why? So eating more fast foods and processed foods that are high in fat, starches, or sugars can cause weight gain, overweight, and obesity. So I'm going to use two terms here. One is fast food and one is highly processed foods. And these are both things we want to limit. So fast foods are readily available convenience foods like potato chips or crisps. They're often consumed frequently and in large portions. As you can see on the picture on the right, you might get a big bag of chips, and it's actually meant to be several servings, but just because of the nature of the chips or crisps, you might eat it all in one sitting. Highly processed foods have undergone industrial processing, so at a factory or a plant, and are higher in energy or calories and lower in nutrients. So the idea is you want to eat as much unprocessed as possible. So we're going to go through this in a little bit. If you look at the left-hand side side of the screen, that column shows what an unprocessed food is. So if you pick your apple from a tree, that's as unprocessed as it can come. But it's basically any edible food part of plant or animal. Now, minimally processed means that it involves a little bit of processing. So if you take your peas, you shell them and you freeze them, that's a little bit of processing, but you haven't added anything to the food that came from nature. If you take your peanuts and you crush them to make peanut butter, don't add anything, that's minimally processed. Maybe if you take an egg and you put it in a pan and you fry it without anything added to it, no oil or anything, that might be minimally processed. Process would be when you start adding sugar, salt, fats, maybe the total would be about 2 to 3 or so ingredients. And these are usually things that can be eaten without adding extra steps after that. So a homemade bread that only has 3 or 4 ingredients and no artificial ingredients would be processed. Olives that you process yourself and then add several things like garlic and oil and lemon, those would be processed. Cheese that are made are processed. Beans that are canned and salt is added for preservation after they've been cooked, let's say, are processed. Now, highly or ultra processed foods, those are the ones we want to avoid. So those involve multiple steps, multiple ingredients, and may include artificial foods or flavors. And I see some thoughts about sweetener. So we're going to talk about that in a second. I'm going to hold off on that question until we get to the sweetened beverage section. So think about unprocessed versus highly processed. And here's an example of what a meal might look like. So on the left-hand side, you'll see an ultra-processed meal, which is, in this case, a Spam sandwich with processed cheese, white bread, potato chips, and diet lemonade. Whereas on the right-hand side, you'll see a minimally processed meal that has grilled beef, barley with olive oil and garlic, steamed broccoli, side salad, and apple slices. So you side by side, that's a clear difference of what it would mean to be ultra-processed versus minimally processed. So fast foods versus processed foods, we have things like potato chips or crisps, things made from white flours like bread, pasta, and pizzas are actually processed foods. Cakes, pastries, cookies, sweets, desserts, these are all processed foods. So that doesn't mean you can't ever eat these things, but you want to limit or avoid them as much as possible. Focus mostly on whole foods and based on plants. Now, one of the reasons we may be eating fast foods or processed foods is we're all busy with work, with family, with all our responsibilities. I'm sure many of you are busy. And maybe you can put in the chat box here if you have some thoughts about what is it about your life that might make you reach for something that's processed or fast. So the idea is we know that you're going to be busy. This is not about avoiding these 100% of the time, but about limiting how much you eat of processed foods because they're high in fats, starches, and sugars, and prepared foods, packaged foods, bakery foods, those types of things, and candies. So what do you do to avoid eating fast and processed foods? And I'm looking at the chat box to see. And I'm holding off on a couple of questions that I see until different parts of the session. But if you can give me your thoughts on what do you do to avoid eating fast or processed foods, I'll give you some of my thoughts. So one is it makes it easier if you prepare. If you're cooking, let's say you're roasting some vegetables, roast double, chop double and roast double and save some of those and use them for your lunch later. When you're cooking a protein like salmon, you might cook an extra batch and freeze it and use it for sandwiches or salads. So try to minimize the work that you do by cooking bigger batches, double batches, triple batches. As an example, for legumes or beans, it takes time to prepare them. So when you cook them, you cook a large quantity and you can freeze a batch without any spices added to them. Well, then when you defrost them, you can add spices and it makes it a lot easier. When I'm running busy from work, let's say, and I get home and I have some frozen beans prepared, it makes it much more likely that I'm going to make something in 30 minutes or 20, 30 minutes or even less, 15 minutes, than let's say, oh, I have to go stop at this fast food place because there's no food for dinner today. So if you're prepared, it can make it easier. And in that same vein, having healthy snacks makes it less likely that you're going to stop at that fast food or that bakery to get some snacks or sweets or desserts. So if you have an apple in your purse, if you keep some dried unsalted nuts in your car, if you have cut up veggies in your fridge, that you can just put quickly as you're running out the door, and you're in a container for you to snack on. So having things that are prepared makes it more likely that you're going to do it. So some of those veggies that you chopped up for cooking, you can also take for snacks with hummus, for example. So let's see if I see any comments from before. Not yet, but tell me if you have some favorite alternatives to fast foods or highly processed food. And while you do that, I'm going to show you one of our favorites in my household. So if you like bananas, and your bananas are overripe, instead of making banana breads or things like that that people tend to make, we slice them, freeze them on a cookie sheet, and then stick them in a bag in the freezer and leave them there until we're ready to make banana ice cream. So you can make it with only bananas in a food processor or a blender. Maybe you can add I add some oat milk, let's say, and some vanilla extract. Just that, and it can look really thick, but if you add more milk, it can look a little bit looser, like the picture on the right-hand side, and it's like eating ice cream. So we have that at home often, and it's a nice way of having something that's like a dessert. But you can also add berry flavors or cocoa powder to make it cocoa flavored. You can add whatever you like. You can even add some Greek yogurt to add some more protein, but it makes a nice way to use up your bananas and have something that would normally, you would go to the perito or the kiosk and buy some ice cream. Well, you already have these bananas frozen at home, and you can have some fun making them at home together with your family. So I'm leaving the recipe here because this video is being recorded so that later you can refer to it if you need to. So let's talk about limiting red and processed meat next. And I'm just checking the chat box. So remember, you can write your thoughts or comments, and I have a couple of those that I'm holding off to next sections. So why do we want to eat less red or processed meats? So eating either red or processed meat increases the risk of, for example, colorectal cancers, and eating more processed meat may increase your risk of breast cancer. Processed meats are often high in salt, and this can also increase your blood pressure and lead to heart disease. So these are some examples of meats in Cyprus, and these are all my photos that you're seeing in the presentation, because wherever I go, I end up getting photos of the foods that we're eating. So these are foods of meats in Cyprus. So you can find meat everywhere in Cyprus. And just to be clear, when I'm talking about red meat, they define it as any type of muscle meat from a mammal, so beef, pork, lamb, goat. When we're talking about processed meat, these are meats that have been transformed through salting, curing, fermentation, smoking to enhance their flavors and preserve them. So hams, salamis, some sausages. Sometimes sausages, if they're fresh made, don't count as processed meat, but if they've been processed through a factory, for example, those are processed meat. So the idea is if you do eat red meat, to limit it to no more than 3 portions a week, and listed here is what a portion would be. And preferably to eat lean rather than fatty meats. And remember, we're talking about cancer prevention here. So eat very little, if any, processed meats. So as an example, if you're given a lovely choice like this for breakfast, if you're thinking about cancer prevention, maybe you want to focus less if they happen to serve you things that are not freshly processed meats from their own farm. For example, if they serve you some processed meats that you bought at the supermarket, maybe focus on the other lovely items that are on the table. So let's talk about limiting sugar-sweetened drinks, and we're going to get to one of the questions that I have in the chat box right now in a second because of that. So drinking sugar-sweetened drinks can cause weight gain, overweight, and obesity, especially when consumed frequently or in large portions. So these are pictures from when I went to the supermarket the other day. You can find aisles and aisles and aisles of sugar-sweetened drinks. So soft drinks, sweetened trees, sports drinks, energy drinks, sweetened juices, sweetened coffee drinks. So to point out, there are all kinds of cans in Cyprus, for example, that are coffee beverages, but also if you go order a coffee at a store and you add sugar, that would be considered a sugary drink. Or if you order a smoothie and it has sugar, or a juice and it has sugar, those would be sugary drinks. And the goal is to drink water or unsweetened drinks such as tea or coffee without added sugar, and not to drink sugary beverages. What about juice? So the idea is not to drink fruit juices in large quantities. So even if you don't add any extra sugar, because obviously fruits have natural sugars in them, but if you don't add any extra sugars, Juices in large quantities are likely to promote weight gain, just like sugary drinks. So you have to be careful when you're drinking juices. So I'm going to get to the question now about sweeteners. So when we talk about there are artificial sweeteners, sweeteners that are derived from nature, and sweeteners that have been manufactured. Today, specifically, we're talking about cancer prevention. So if you look at the World Cancer Research Fund recommendations, they point out that to date, there has not been evidence that the use of sweeteners has led to cancer. So the compilation of all the evidence in existence to date doesn't point any correlation between drinking sweetened beverages from artificial sweeteners and cancer. So that's specifically about cancer prevention. When it talks about diabetes, which is one of the questions I have in the chat box, if you're talking about diabetes management or diabetes prevention, are still recommendations that you can use artificial sweeteners even if you have diabetes, because one of the questions points out how do they spike insulin, etc. So these are the guidelines and the recommendations. Now, I would just refrain, if you remember, artificial sweeteners are processed. So today, on the basis of these recommendations and the idea to eat mostly whole foods that are plant-based, it would be preferable actually not to have any sweeteners at all. But in the end, we're going to talk about what you have to choose as what is best for you and your life and your personal choices. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So what are some of your favorite alternatives to sugary drinks? So somebody mentioned you can add sweeteners. Yes, that's true. Let's see if you have any other thoughts in the chat box. In my house, we drink water. But, for example, my husband might add a little bit of some type of sweetened beverage to his water, because if he doesn't want to forego fully sweetened beverages, he'll add just a splash and give it a little taste. But instead of that, if you want to avoid these sugary beverages completely, you can do like on the right-hand picture, which you can put slices of fruits or vegetables like basil and strawberries, lemons or limes. You can add just berries, and it gives a nice flavor to your water. So that's what we do. I'm going to see if anybody has given any thoughts in the chat box of what they do. And while I'm waiting, I'm going to go on to one of the next steps. We're talking about cancer prevention. So the recommendation is to avoid alcohol. There is strong evidence that drinking alcohol is associated with many kinds of cancers, for example, breast cancer. And for cancer prevention, it's best not to drink alcohol. If you drink alcohol, it's best not to exceed the national guidelines, which, for example, would be 1 drink for women and 2 drinks for men. And you can look up the sizes on the different websites. This is about cancer prevention today. So I know that some people might point out, yes, but red wine, they've said, has this benefit or that benefit. Well, today we're focusing on cancer prevention. And for cancer, the recommendation is to avoid alcohol. So to summarize the diet recommendations, how you can best nourish yourself, you notice that most of these recommendations are recommendations that in general would serve for most health and chronic disease prevention. So they are to choose whole foods, whole grains, whole wheat pastas, for example, oats, whole grain breads, to eat more vegetables and fruits, to eat more pulses and legumes, and to limit fast foods and processed foods like chips and sodas, and to limit red and processed meats, to limit sugary drinks, and to limit alcohol. So I'll see if anybody wants to put some of their challenges about following these recommendations in the chat box, or give an example of what has worked well for you. So please feel free to add a thought. I hear some challenges about it's hard to have a snack, like let's say just a fruit as a snack in the afternoon. And that may be why, if you talk to people that are experts, like registered dietitians, for example, they may tell you to pair your fruit or your vegetable with some type of protein, like unsalted nuts, or for example, if you have an apple with some unsalted peanut butter with nothing else added to it, which you can find in some very delicious, nothing else added peanut butter, almond butter, or you might want to add some hummus or dried chickpeas to your veggies, because it is hard to have sometimes only a piece of fruit. It might not be as filling. So that's one of the points that I saw in the chat box that I'll comment on. Let's see if we can look here. So if you're thinking about what we've talked to date, when you have beautiful spreads like these here, these are from Cyprus, there are many options here where they'll give you fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. So try to think about putting those on your plate first, eating slowly, and focusing on those types of foods to help with cancer prevention. Well, let's talk specifically about one of the next recommendations, which is do not use supplements for cancer prevention. So high-dose dietary supplements are not recommended for cancer prevention. This means pills that you would take, let's say, buy over the counter in a pharmacy. For example, high-dose beta-carotene supplements may actually increase the risk of lung cancer in some people. The idea is that at this point, the evidence and research that's out there doesn't point to a benefit in taking high-dose supplements. What we do know is that getting the nutrients that you need through your diet is what we all need. So that's why focusing on whole foods, plants, fruits, vegetables, and implementing those as much as possible in your diet is what they recommend. And I do want to add that somebody said that in order to make your beverages maybe more exciting to your water, you might add a squeeze of lime or lemon juice. Thank you for that comment. So one of the last recommendations we're going to go through is to breastfeed your baby if you can. Obviously, this does not apply to all of you, but if you are able to breastfeed, breastfeeding protects not only the mother, but also the infant. So breastfeeding protects against breast cancer in the mother and actually lowers the risk of type 2 diabetes, but it also promotes healthy growth in the infant. It protects against overweight and obesity and their related cancers, protects against infections, and lowers the risk of asthma and type 2 diabetes. So the last recommendation we're going to discuss is being physically active. So I don't know if any of you would like to comment whether you got some physical activity today. Today in Cyprus, it's a bit rainy and cooler than it has been. Maybe in the part of the world you're watching from, it is a little cooler too. So sometimes it's helpful to be purposeful to include physical activity in your day. I'll tell you that, for myself, I'm walking my daughter to and from school to make sure that I do get physical activity in my day. So what does that mean, physical activity? So I'm just going to point out that I said at the beginning that I'm a lifestyle medicine physician. So we talked about healthy eating, first part of the conversation today. Lifestyle medicine actually has 6 parts that are listed here. Beyond healthy eating, it's also about physical activity, managing stress, healthy relationships, sleep, and avoiding risky substances. So we are going to talk about physical activity, which is the second pillar of lifestyle medicine. And it's actually one of the recommendations from the World Cancer Research Fund is to be physically active to prevent cancer. But this is not just about preventing cancer. Physical activity can help so many other health risks. And listed here, you'll see for cancer that just the examples that are listed here, people who are physically active have a lower risk of breast cancer, you see by 20%, colorectal cancer 19%, but also things like type 2 diabetes, 35% lower risk, cognitive decline, which is about your brain and the decline as you grow older, 40% lower risk, hypertension, a third lower risk, depression, almost half lower risk, and all-cause mortality. So the likelihood that you're going to die is almost a third. Bone fractures by 2/3. So physical activity helps on so many different fronts, and that's one of the things that I wanted to highlight today because, we may know some of these, but we sometimes don't take as much advantage of it as we can. So for cancer, remember that physical activity is also key. And what does it mean to be physically active? So all of you are sitting right now watching me on the screen. We are not being physically active. So this is a reminder to you to stand up and stretch. You can watch this standing up. You don't have to be sitting down. And I won't stand up so that you can still see me, but after this I will. So when you're going to be physically active, the recommendation for adults is to get at least 150 minutes of moderate physical activity each week, or 75 minutes of vigorous physical activity each week. And what is an example of this? So if you're trying to meet the 150 minutes of moderate physical activity, you might say do 30 minutes of brisk walking Monday through Friday every week. And that would meet your physical activity requirements. How do you know if you're doing moderate physical activity or vigorous physical activity? So if you're walking down the street and you're able to talk to your partner or talk on the phone and have this very long conversation, or if you're you're able to sing somebody a song, then you're not having enough physical activity intensity to consider it moderate. When you're having moderate physical activity, you should be able to talk but not sing. When you're having vigorous physical activity, you shouldn't be able to talk or sing. Basically, you're going to have difficulty talking, or you have to take some breaths. So examples of each. Moderate, I said before, is brisk walking. It can be also dancing that's not leisurely. It could be hiking. It could be cycling. Vigorous would be something like jogging or running, fast swimming, competitive sports, walking or climbing briskly up a hill, or fast cycling, or some intense aerobic classes. So this is what it means to have moderate versus vigorous physical activity. So can you talk and sing? Then you're not doing moderate intensity physical activity. Can you talk but not sing? Then you're doing moderate. Can you neither talk nor sing? Then you're doing vigorous. But it's not just about exercise, which is what I actually was mentioning before. Physical activity includes many components: exercise, strength training, flexibility, balance, and reducing inactivity. These image that is on the screen now is from the NHS, from the UK recommendations, which are very much like the ones in the United States, for example. So, for example, we talked about exercise in the slides before, but adults were also recommended to do strength building activities on at least 2 days a week, and to work on balance in older adults 2 days a week. And I talked about reducing inactivity. So this is a nice reminder for each one of you. If you didn't stand up before, you should stand up and stretch now. Raise your arms up. Make sure that you're moving, because staying stationary and inactive is actually a risk, has an independent risk factor for many poor outcomes in of itself. So even if you exercise the recommended amount of exercise, if you're inactive all day long, meaning you're sitting at a desk 8 hours a day and not standing up, then you still have some health risks. So stretch and move. So to summarize the 10 cancer prevention recommendations, they are to be a healthy weight, and then there are recommendations about diet that we just discussed, including eating whole grains, veg, fruits, and beans, but limiting fast foods, red and processed meat, sugar-sweetened drinks, and alcohol consumption, and not to use supplements for cancer prevention, to breastfeed your baby if you can, and to be physically active. But also, if you do end up with cancer, to consider these recommendations for your future as well. So I have just given you all a lot of information. And part of that is I wanted to make sure that you have at least heard the 10 recommendations for cancer prevention, because I feel like if this evidence and research exists, we should know about it, right? But it may be a lot of information for you, and you may have no idea of everything that I said. What should you do now? Like, are you really supposed to change all those 9 or 10 things in your life? Well, it's not really about changing everything. But if you have some ideas of some changes that we talked about before, some things that would help with cancer prevention that you're thinking of doing, please feel free to write it in the chat box now. I would love to hear it. So what changes are you thinking of making in your life to help reduce your risk of getting cancer? And while maybe I get some thoughts in the chat box, I'm going to talk about how you can actually make some goals, because we've given you all this information, the research that is known about cancer prevention, and what the international recommendations are for cancer prevention, so that you know about it. But the idea is, once you know about it, you can choose how and if you want to implement those in your own life. So how do you make goals? So let's see if you have ever tried to change anything in your lifestyle before. Think of any lifestyle goal in the past that you've set, and feel free to write it in the chat box and tell us about what went well for you when you made that goal. Or what were some challenges you faced when you were trying to reach that goal? And I'll see if you put anything in the chat box, because we know that reaching goals can be challenging. Maintaining your ideas for change can also be difficult. So if you have any ideas of difficulties or things that went well for you, please share, because that can be beneficial for everyone. I'll give some examples here while I'm waiting to see if anybody wants to put anything in the chat box. Some goals that you might have tried to reach. Let's say, I want to eat less junk food. I want to exercise more. I'm going to drink less soft drinks or sodas. Those are 3 examples of goals. Well, it can actually help to set what's called a SMART goal. So I'm going to go through what that means. So SMART is an acronym, and that means that every letter in the word SMART is a different word. So the S is for specific, the M is for measurable, the A is for achievable, the R is for realistic, and the T is for time-based. So what does that mean? So if you're going to make a goal, it helps to make it specific. So what exactly is it that you're going to add or change in your life? It helps if you can measure it. How many times a day or a week are you going to do it? How much are you going to do? Are you going to do moderate intensity or vigorous intensity? And what kind of exercise? Is it something that you can achieve? For example, if you say, I want to eat green vegetables 3 times a week, but you have none in the refrigerator, then you can't achieve it. Or I want to join a gym, but you don't have one near you, or it's COVID pandemic and the gyms are all closed, then you can't achieve it right now. So realistic, it has to be something that you can do. If you're drinking 5 sodas a day, it would be hard to set a goal that says I'm going to go from 5 sodas a day to 0 sodas a day. Maybe it's more realistic, let's say, if you've never exercised, to say that you're going to start with 10 minutes of walking 3 days a week, then to say I'm going to do a 1-hour exercise 7 days a week. You want to make it realistic. And then time-based. It helps if you decide you want to do it for 1 week, or 2 weeks, or 4 weeks, and not just say, I'm going to do this, because if there's no end date, you don't have a time where you can evaluate how it went. And you want to say when you're going to start, because if you tell yourself, I'm going to start exercising, but you don't give yourself a start date, then you're less likely to do it. So SMART goals, and I'm going to give you an example. And I'm going to look at the chat box, because I see somebody is interested in looking at goals. So SMART healthy eating goal example here. Let's say you go to work, and one of your things that you're thinking about is, I've been snacking a lot on things from the peripter or the kiosk. I've been snacking on the vending machine if you're a student. So maybe you decide that you want to start eating healthy snacks, right? So in order to make it as smart of a goal as possible, you're going to say, for example, starting this Monday, I'm going to start carrying 2 healthy snacks with me. For example, hummus and veggies, and some unsalted nuts if you don't have anybody with nut allergies at your work. And so I'm going to carry those 2 healthy snacks with me Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so that if I get hungry, I already have something to eat. And I'm going to try it for 1 week and see how it goes. So that is a SMART goal, because you said when you're going to start it and how long. So that makes it time-based. It's realistic, because you're not saying you're never eating from a vending machine or a peripter again, because that might be difficult for you if you like those things. Achievable, because you happen to have some healthy snacks and you went to the supermarket. Measurable, because Monday through Friday you're going to keep track on a log and see what happened. And specific, because you said that you're going to carry 2 healthy snacks, right? So SMART goal. So the difference between a goal that is not SMART, that does not use the SMART acronym, and a SMART goal is on the screen here. So I will eat healthier snacks is not using the SMART goal format. But if you say, starting on Monday, I will carry 2 healthy snacks with me to work each workday for the next 1 week, that is a SMART goal. So I'm going to give you a couple of other examples just so you can think about it in case you've never heard this SMART goal format before. So for vegetables, let's say you heard what we said before about how we should be eating vegetables and fruits and whole grains and legumes. Let's say you decide that on Monday, you're going to add a vegetable to lunch and dinner every day for the next 7 days. And that's your goal. So this is how you make it SMART, because you're going to be very specific about it and you're going to try to keep track. And just to point out before we go through the other examples, the idea is improvement, not perfection. So the idea is actually to learn about what went wrong. Let's say you weren't able to add a vegetable to lunch and dinner at the end of the week. You think about what happened. What were the barriers, obstacles that you ran into? Because that can actually help you think about how to overcome them. So it's not about, hey, I didn't meet my goal at the end of the week, so I'm never going to be able to do it. This is about, why didn't I meet my goal? Was it because I forgot to go buy some healthy snacks at the supermarket? Or was it because I was so busy and I forgot my lunchbox at home? Like, think about your barriers, because that way you can overcome them. So snacks, we already gave that example. For drinks, let's say that you wanted to decrease the number of sugary drinks that you're drinking. So you want to start with something realistic for you. So you say, on Monday, I'm going to drink 1 bottle of water instead of 1 soft drink each workday for the next 2 weeks. For exercise, like I said before, maybe you want to start with 15 minutes of walking during your lunch hour on Tuesdays and Thursdays for the next 2 weeks. And realize these goals are 1 week, 2 weeks, they're not 10 months. You want to start off with something that's manageable and realistic for you, and then evaluate what happened and see what you can adjust to make sure that you work on achieving it. So this is an example of what you might do if your goal would be to add vegetables or fruits to every meal or snack for the next week, for example. You can even have what some people here have for a light meal later, which is zucchini and eggs. You could have that for breakfast. So I talked about the 10 recommendations. Now, how do you choose which goal to work on? There's so many things, right? So I gave you so many options. How do you choose which one to work on next? So you have to choose one that is meaningful to you, that tells you that you are ready to change. And the reason is, it's not about me changing your behavior or anybody else. It's about, what are you ready to change that's meaningful for you, that you can sustain. So one way to think about this is this example of how I have here. How important is it for you to eat more vegetables versus, let's say, to exercise more? So if I give you at a scale from 0 to 10, like is on this screen right now, where 0 is not important and 10 is very important, how important is it for you? Let's say you say, I think it's a 7 for me, how important I feel about me starting to incorporate more vegetables into my diet. But for exercise, it's at a 3. So vegetables is more important to you than exercise right now. So that might be a goal that you might want to consider. And how confident are you that you can eat more vegetables? Let's say you don't really like vegetables or haven't found any that you like very much. So you think you're maybe at a 5 out of 10 in your confidence. So something that can be helpful is to think about, what would need to happen so that your confidence number moves from a 5, let's say, to a 7. Let's say, what if you cooked with one of your friends and they showed you a couple of their favorite recipes to find some recipes that you like. Like, let's say that's what you tell me might actually make your confidence higher. So if it's something that's important to you and you feel like you can achieve it, then that's the right goals to sort of choose to work on. So of all the things that we talked about today, at the end of this conversation, what I'd love for you to think about is, what hits me as the most important thing for me to change in my life right now? Not what everybody else is telling me that I should change. What do I think I want to work on? And then you make a SMART goal to work on it for the next 1 week, 2 weeks, and then reevaluate to see what happened. Because the next steps ideally would be that, is you make your own SMART goals. Yes, and somebody commented, for example, making a meal plan for the week might be helpful. Some people find it very helpful to, let's say, take on Sunday, prepare all their fruits and vegetables, go shopping, have their meals ready for the week so that they know what they can have ready for the week for meals or for snacks. And for example, somebody posted that you might have a SMART goal that's a cooking goal. So it's not about maybe how many vegetables you're eating, but it might be that you want to start cooking 2 meals at home instead of eating out 5 days a week. So absolutely, that's a great point in the chat box. So what is a SMART goal for you? I put here that if you come to our University of Nicosia Medical Center, because you might be a patient there, for example, we use these forms. The doctors use a variety of these forms. The registered dietitian uses a different form. Maybe if you aren't from here, your doctor uses that as well too. But the idea is just to write down your goal. There's evidence that shows that if you write it down on a piece of paper, you're more likely to meet it. And if you make your goal short, the time frame about 1 week, 2 weeks, then you have time to look to see whether your achievement. So the goal forms that we use here have check boxes. So that, let's say my goal was, as somebody suggested, let's say starting on Monday, I'm gonna cook 2 home cooked meals during the week. And that's my goal for 1 week. So then I have check boxes, and I say, when I cooked one on Tuesday and one on Thursday, oh, I met it. Or maybe I was only able to do it on Tuesday. So then think about why did that happen? What happened that led you to not be able to meet your goal? Because that's what's going to help you be able to overcome any obstacles or barriers. And so remember, this is about you achieving your goal, not about somebody else setting a goal for you. So ideally, I would hope that after this conversation, you take the recommendations that you've heard for cancer prevention and make your own SMART goals. Because in summary, like we talked about, lifestyle makes a difference for cancer prevention. And the idea is to start with small steps. Make a couple of SMART goals and follow up to see if you've made progress, and to think about what were the barriers that you encountered. Because the idea is you can actually do things to nourish yourself, care for yourself and your health in general, but there are also some things you can do that can help prevent you from prevent you from developing cancer and decrease your risk from cancer in the future. And so if those recommendations exist, now you've heard them. This presentation will be recorded so that you'll be able to refer back to them. But I hope that you can give us some examples of SMART goals. Now, I want to point out that we love to hear your feedback about the presentation. I'm going to answer a couple of questions after this, but in case you have to go, I just wanted to point out that there is a feedback form. If you look on the YouTube page, when you look at the description under the YouTube video, there is a link for a form that starts with forms.office.com, and there you can, it's just a one-page feedback form, and it's electronic, and I would love and appreciate any thoughts and feedback because we look to improve our sessions. So in case you have to go, I just wanted to point that out. But for those of you that are still here, I'd love to hear what is one thing that you're going to take away from today's session. If you want to put that in the chat box for me, I'll go ahead and answer at least one more question that I know I had seen. Somebody asked about the keto diet. So if you notice in today's conversation, I was really focusing on cancer prevention and what the evidence and the details are about cancer prevention. So keto diet is not yet summarized for cancer prevention. So I can't really comment on the keto diet for cancer prevention. But if you think about how the keto diet is achieved, in some people achieve the keto diet by utilizing red meats, maybe processed meats, things that are high in fat and sugar. So when we're thinking about cancer recommendations, if you can follow the keto diet and still follow the cancer recommendations, there wouldn't be a problem for that. So for cancer prevention, there's no one specific diet that the World Cancer Research Fund recommends. But in general, regardless of what diet you utilize, for example, I'm with Cyprus right now. So the Mediterranean diet is the type of diet that has been traditionally eating in Cyprus, although in the modern age, sometimes we're moving away from that and eating more fast foods and processed foods and meats, let's say, than the traditional Mediterranean diet, which included really lots of legumes, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and some seafood, and some low-fat dairy, for example. So that's the Mediterranean diet, for example. So today we weren't recommending a specific diet, and as I commented before, for cancer prevention, if you can still follow the general recommendations about the types of foods you should be eating, there's no one specific diet that's going to be recommended. So let me just look at the chat box to see if there are any other questions that I missed. And I'm just looking to see if anybody wants to put one thing that you will take from today. So I see somebody pointed out that they're taking away from here the SMART goals. So I actually find that's one of the helpful things, even for myself, is to try to remember to write them down. It makes a difference. So if you think it in your head, there is some difference that shows that if you actually write it and put it somewhere that you can see it. Maybe if you put it on your refrigerator or in your phone or in your diary, but remember to make it realistic and time bound, so that you, in 1 week, you look at it and remember it's not about judging yourself and whether you were able to meet your goal. It's about seeing what barriers, how you can overcome barriers, so that in the end you continue to improve the things that you want to improve about your life. So let me see if there are any other thoughts. If not, questions, please feel free. And let me double check the chat box to see if I missed any questions. I think I addressed the questions that I see, and I appreciate those of you that have taken time to make some comments. If you don't have any further questions, I will say thank you for taking the time to participate today. I know we covered a lot of information, but my hope is you can go back to this presentation, but really just think about what was the one thing that struck you that you feel is important for your own life, that you think you can achieve, and make a goal about it and work on it. It's wonderful and amazing that we have research and evidence about things we can do that can help us decrease the risk of our developing cancers in our own lifetime. So we should all take that information and see how it can fit into our own lives. So thank you. As I said, I'm coming from the University of Nicosia, but I'm presenting on behalf of the medical center. So we have other sessions that we hold periodically, which is why we welcome your feedback. And if you didn't hear me say it before, there is a link under the YouTube video, under the description of the video, where you can give some feedback. And you can also write any thoughts or comments in the chat box. But that is the end of my presentation for today. I'm just going to look one more time to make sure that I didn't miss anybody's thoughts or comments in the chat box. Today, I feel like we addressed all of them. Okay, so thank you all for your time. If you had any trouble with the audio or the video today, don't worry, because this presentation is being recorded and will be accessible for you in the future, actually shortly, on the University of Nicosia's website. So you'll be able to access this presentation later on if you want to refer back to it, for example, even for the recipe that was listed on there, or for some of the ideas, or to remember what the recommendations were. I would refer you, if you want to find out more, you can also look at the World Cancer Research Fund's website, which has information about the cancer prevention recommendations. And the link for that is under the first slide, where I talk about the recommendations, if you want to look for it. So thank you all again. Thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. And the feedback form, just so that you know, has a spot for you to give some recommendations on future topics that you would like to hear as well. So please feel free to give us any thoughts or recommendations. And we're going to go ahead and end the presentation today. Thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.